Hey everybody, I want to give you a little bit of an update and also talk a little bit more about design from some emails I got. So what I'm doing right now is I'm down actually in my shop in the basement, which I haven't been for a long time. And what I'm doing here is I'm setting up a test rig with the 4 motors that I'm going to run at 8S and see what my amps and watts are with my watt meter. So I've got my 4 Hacker. These are A60-16Ls. They'll be turning 3-bladed, let's see, they're 3-bladed 21-inch 14-pitch props. And I'm hoping tomorrow I can do the test rig. Do the test run. So what I've done here is these are the actual lengths of wire that will be needed from the front of the airplane where the ESCs are back to the actual motors, okay? And before you start raising hell about lengthening wires, you can't lengthen the battery wires, but you can lengthen the ESC wires, okay, to the motors. So let's see, is this aiming pretty well? Yeah, it is. So I got an interesting email from somebody asking me about how hard it is to really design all this stuff. And I don't know if how hard is the correct word that I would use. Hang on, everybody. I'm trying to make sure there's no reflections on this thing for you. So, but what I do want to talk about is, I don't know the right phrase for it, but sometimes I call it like cascading. And, so let's just hypothetically here, say we're going to design an airplane. And we're going to do it first by sketching it up. Okay, so, well, that's a really weak blue. Yeah, you can even see that. So sketching it up, let's say it takes a couple of days, and then out of sketching it up, I can create my CAD. And let's say the CAD is for printing out on my plotter some fuselage templates, wing templates, different parts of the fuselage. But also in CAD, I'm getting the dimensions and ideas of what I've got to do in other CAD programs. So this CAD program is 2D. This CAD program would be 3D, and it's for basically 3D printing. So it's for 3D printing things, okay? 3D is normally what I use. So I can export an STL, turn it into a G code through a slicer, and 3D print something. So I've got CAD for 2D. That could be fuselage, wings, stabs, whatever. That comes out of my plotter that I'm going to use to cut out parts. The CAD for 3D is for 3D printing parts, like this fan holder right here I'm designing. I'm not sure if that's focused. But this is a fan holder that's going to go on top of my ESC to help cool my ESC, because ESCs are in the fuselage. There'll be airflow, but not a lot of airflow. So let's put some hours to this. Let's say that I had 10 hours of sketches I did. Let's say I had, I don't know, let's say 30 or 40 hours of 2D. Then let's say I have the same. Let's just make this up. 30 to 40 hours of 3D time. So I've got some hours started in this before I've cut out the first piece of the airplane. So let's say all of this here is considered, let's just put a number 1 here and call it design. Okay? So all of this is in the design phase of my aircraft or my widget or whatever I'm trying to create. Now, if you're starting something from nothing, if you are inventing your own airframe, if you're not copying it from plans online, there's an awful lot of math that may go into that design. The size of the stabs, depending on how big the wing is, with relationship with how long that moment are. So in this design phase of 2D, you might have another 40 hours of, let's just put an M there, for math. 40 hours of math, and that's figuring out your square inches, what you think your cube loading is going to be with what you guesstimate the airplane is going to weigh. So you've done all of this before you've cut your first part. It still all falls under number one is design. Okay? And this is where I'm going to get into this, what I call cascading effect. Or if you remember when you raised your kids, there was that song that your kids always watch at the end of that one kids show. It was a song that never ends. You know, this is a song that never ends. It just goes on and on, my friends. You know that song. That's what designing an airplane feels like sometimes, or designing a widget. It feels like it goes on and on, like it's never going to end, and it can really depress you if you don't understand why you're doing this, why you started this design. If you think you're going to start a design from nothing, and it is going to be simple or it's going to be easy, you're crazy. So let's hypothetically, this is all hypothetical right now. So hypothetically, we've got this airplane designed right here. So now we want to start cutting out some parts. Okay, we just want to start cutting stuff. Cutting and gluing, or hot wire cutting, or fiberglass. You want to start building, okay? But you to build, you have to cut. Okay? Building is going to be number 3. So, you cut out some parts, you slide them together, and you go, holy crap, that doesn't look right. Or holy crap, I'm going to have to add a bunch of stuff in there because I've got a motor mount there. Or holy crap, where do my landing gears mount to? You go back to 2D. You're piling on now more hours for redesign. Okay? Or, like I just had happen on me, I 3D printed some parts and screwed up this measurement by 4 millimeters, printed out some pieces, went to line it up, and the holes didn't line up. And this is what's crazy. I'll show it to you. So on this speed controller right here, these radiuses start at this edge here. This radius is kicked out 3 millimeters more and I didn't catch it. So when I meant to make this, guess what I ended up with? 3 millimeters short. Okay? So that type of shit will drive you nuts. It drives you completely crazy because you're sitting here with your calipers, you're measuring everything about this speed controller, and you didn't see that these radiuses of the circles, their edge lined up with the edge of this, and I just assumed when I was drawing that it lined up here, did another 10-inch radius, 10 millimeter radius, and guess what? It's a 10 millimeter radius, all set 3 millimeters outside of the printed circuit board. What is that? Redesign work. Except, now you're doing it in 3D. I don't know, let's say you end up 40 hours on this project of redesign work. I'm just guessing right now. Okay, guys, this is hypothetical. But hopefully you're understanding where I'm going with this. All of this has happened, and all I did was cut out a piece or 3D printed it and realized I did it wrong. So now I had to go back and redesign. Okay? So now let's say you start to build. And you are going to build an airplane with a 20-foot wing, and you're going to use pink styrofoam like I am. You are going to drill holes through it where your spars are going to go, but you're going to have these holders that you 3D print that hold the spar in place. So you take your your styrofoam pink, and you go through 3 ribs at a time cutting holes because you've got to line it up as best as you can. You've tried to build a jig, and you go through. You get 20 of them cut out. You throw them to the side. You go to bed that night. You come back the next day. You know that you've got a bunch of ribs to come out, but you're cut out, but you're just a little bit like, I don't want to do that. I'm going to procrastinate. I want to go work on the landing gear. And you use your saws and drills. Then you put your jig back on there to cut the ribs. And the rib was off by about 3/8 of an inch, the hole in it. No, not that much. About 3/16 of an inch. So now let's say you're building, and you have your wing center section. You put on the right wing, all the inserts lined up. You put on your left wing, 3 degrees off. And you're like, what the hell did I do wrong there? There's 2 spars. The back spar, because the jig was off 3/16 of an inch, has tilted the wing. So what do? Now you got to go back, because where your wing, you're gonna have little pins that the wing will plug into to lock in the inserts. You don't allow those 2 spars to lock it in. So what do? Is you get in there and you start bending things around because it's pink styrofoam. You're like, hey, I can bend this a little bit. So it's not a big deal. But now you got to redesign where those hard mounts are that it's going to slide into to make sure they're strong enough that they don't work themselves out. Now what I did on this little mistake I did is go into underneath each rib in the pink foam, and I took a little hacksaw blade and I sawed out about an 1/8 inch groove into the first 3 ribs, so I could move that wing tube down. Yeah, I cut the top and bottom. I put a wedge in the top to push it down, and I was able to get it to move that 3/16 of an inch and line it up. That was about a 10-hour diversion in my building. Those little things. So let's just hypothetically say, you have 10 things you're going to do on the airplane. And I'm talking about when you first design it, in your mind, I have 10 things to do. Each of those little diversions add on all these little paths that you have to do. Now, do any of these paths interfere with any of these steps? Or these steps? Or are you all the way out here and this affected 5 so severely you had to go back in and redesign? So one of the things that I want everybody to understand is I've had a lot of criticism sometimes for benching an airplane. If you remember the NSL-1, it took me a couple of years to build it, and I benched it for almost 3 years because the gas engine that was originally going to be in it almost shook it apart at idle. So I thought the airplane was a failure, and it went right into storage. And that airplane is right there, by the way, which, by the way, has over 600 flights on it now. But sorry about that. But sorry, I'm trying to get the camera right. But what happened was when I found out they made a hacker big enough, the motor big enough to fly that airplane, well, then I put it in there, but I had to cut the nose off and extend it 8 inches to get the CG right, because that electric motor weighed a lot less than that 150cc twin cylinder internal combustion, that 3W150 I had. So that airplane, from the moment I started it to the moment I test flew it, was 6.5 years. The MSL-2, I built that in about 1.5 years and then benched that for 2 years until I built new wings for it. So that plane took me about 4.5 to 5 years before it flew. Now the fraEmmastein I'm building, I started 10 months ago, and it will be done this fall. But I keep running into little things, these little fragments, as I call them. And let me give you an example of what a fragment might be that becomes what I call like cascading in your design. So let's say my weight came in too heavy, which we know it did. So what does that affect? That affects, let's say number 3 is the landing gear. So this has caused a redesign or a reevaluation of the landing gear to say, are you going to be strong enough for a fully loaded 100-pound airplane now? because you were planning on being fully loaded at 77. Okay. So, you know, guys, what is that, 23 more pounds I'm sticking in that airplane. Is that right? Yeah. 23 more pounds I'm putting in that airplane. On landing gear, I didn't design for that 23 extra pounds. So landing gear is going to be a big issue. Now, let's say number 5 is the motor. Is that weight going to affect the motor? Am I going to have enough power? Well, I've already known I've got gobs of power. I do need to go back in and verify. Let's say number 7 is the wing loading of the airplane. I do know with my higher weight, I need to go back in and verify my wing loading hasn't gone all to ape shit. So it's very easy to say that these 10 things here should have been just straight lines, when in dreamland, I thought I had figured it all out at the design stage. And the bottom line is, if you're building something totally from scratch, nothing that's ever existed, I'm not talking about taking a pair of Zeroli drawings and building an airplane, because you already know the incidents, the wing square inches, the stab square inches, that's already done for you. If you're designing something from nothing, I mean, you're starting totally from scratch, you are going to have massive pain. You're going to have massive, I hate to use the word failures, because, you know, everybody says you have to fail 100 times to have success once. Or like Edison said, fake it until you make it. You know, I don't even know how to address, I mean, so many different people have chimed in on what failure means. And I don't even know if I define me coming in too heavy is failure. I don't know if me designing the landing gear too light is failure. I don't know if me having the left wing incidence is all screwed up, a failure. I think any time that you're trying to build something from nothing, you will always run into challenges. And because no one's ever done it. You know, I'm trying to build a pink airplane, pink foam airplane, only with fiberglass on it, with minimal other products in it, I mean other materials in it. I mean, this airplane is basically styrofoam, pink styrofoam, fiberglass with resin, and it is a little bit of carbon fiber, a little bit, not much carbon fiber in this airplane. So you need to, even if the airplane ends up being a turd when you're done, even if it flies like crap, even if it doesn't fly, even if it flies 100 yards and crashes, you just got to keep going. And when you're building something from nothing, you end up with so many unknowns. But you have to trust that what you've done in the past, you have to trust yourself that you know enough about what you're doing, or you would have never started it in the first place. Now, I know there have been times, you know, it's interesting. I try to think of myself, was there anything I ever started that I completely ditched? And there is. There's a couple of projects I've started, and once I got them about 10% done, I just realized, you know, this isn't going the way I want it to go. Now, this was a long time ago. Nowadays, I think I've got my head around it. But imagine this for a minute. I got an email from a real cool aeronautical engineer that has spent 30 or 40 years working for a lot of big manufacturers you've all heard of, and a national agency of space and stuff. And we like to share ideas about just design and challenges and things we looked at. And he made a really good point on landing gear design, that many times they'll go back and look at different landing gears and the way they were built and everything that made them up, and say, okay, how do we kind of adapt that into the landing gear we want? And he said, so somebody else's bloody knuckles, somebody else's hard work had already gone into figuring that out. So a lot of what all we do is looking at something that's been done and saying, okay, how do we modify it to our design? And when I look at the airplanes I'm building or I want to build in the future, they all have wings, they all have tails, they all have motors, they all have wheels, they all have fuselages. But building a plane that you know is going to work, that you really feel is going to be safe in the air, can really, it can try your nerves, especially when you hit a obstacle or a challenge around just about every corner. And you just got to persevere through it. You just got to push through it. You just got to keep going. Even if it ends up being a complete turd when you're done, you finished it. So I hope all this makes sense, but I wanted to address it because I've gotten quite a few emails about, at what point do you give up? At what point do you ditch it? Like the B-36, I guess technically I gave up on it because I didn't want to build a fourth set of wings. But when somebody offered me enough money to fund my hobby for 3 years, it wasn't hard to sell the B-36. So I would still argue with somebody over a drink that I didn't give up. I had shelved it, just like I had shelved the MSL1, just like I shelved the MSL2. And somebody come along and offered me ridiculous money for it, which I don't know if is ridiculous. I've had several people tell me the plane is absolutely worth what I sold it for. So everybody, thanks for watching my videos. I want to give you a little bit of an update. I also want to touch on why you should never give up, and also explain to you that you are going to have all kinds of crap go on when you're building something from nothing that you never saw coming. You never imagined it was going to do that. Or little bitty things that you missed, and your incidences or your wings crooked or something, you can fix that. Worst thing is you can build another wing. So thanks for watching my videos, everybody. Everybody have an awesome day. Keep the emails coming. I know I owe a video on all the emails I was asked, and I will get that done very shortly. So rock on, everybody. And I should have the full motor testing of the 4 motors done sometime tomorrow afternoon. It's late in the evening right now, and I'm going to call it a day. Rock on, everybody. Take care of each other. Be safe. Bye.